Hey everybody, welcome back to Cloth Map HQ, a different looking Cloth Map HQ. I've got my sweet magnetic map behind me, much more open in here, versatile. I even have a camera with a tripod on it now to do stand-up things. I got a little tripod for the light that I have over here in case it's too dark in here. Much more versatile. I did a live stream from here. If you guys watched the Bike MS stream that I did, I noticed a lot of Patreon names on the donation sheet, so thank you everyone who donated for that. If you missed it and want to see it, there's an archive on the Cloth Map YouTube channel. I streamed some video games with my good friends Vinny Caravella and Alexis Gajisa. Also, someone put together a really good like trimmed down version of the best of me and Vinny's flight sim adventures, and I retweeted that on my personal Twitter account, so you can check that out too. But we're not here to fly planes. That would be pretty cool. I should do one of these from an airplane sometime. But we are here to talk Q's and A's, so let's get right to it. Brad Baker asks, Drew, I assume you had a decent following from Giant Bomb, but what do you find is/are the best ways of growing your base and getting the word out? I'm a couple weeks into creating on Patreon and just received my first patron, a friend. Congratulations. That's cool. Yes. So this is kind of, this is the big question about being a creator on the internet. How do you expand your audience? You know, there are ways to do this that are gross. There are ways to do this that I think are better, not from just a personal ethical standpoint, but I think, I guess I should talk in terms of specifics here when I say this kind of stuff. Like clickbait is a bad way to grow your audience, right? You don't want to do a bait and switch where if you create video content, you know, everyone has seen the YouTube video that's like super flashy or like has some scantily clad person on it that makes you want to click. And then the video is nothing about that, right? They're just going after the clicks. Instead, I think if I were to boil down my content strategy in this realm, it would be to create content that is easy to watch. And that is, there's a lot that's associated with that. Number one, you want it to be easy in the sense that it's well produced. You know, the audio is good, the video is good, whatever you're creating. And you want it to be easy in the sense that it is easy for the person to get what they came for. So you want your content to be helpful in a sense. You want people to feel satisfied when they see it. This isn't necessarily about growing your viewer base, I guess, but it will get people to stick around. And I guess they're kind of related because the research that I've done into like SEO, search engine optimization, which is you know, if people search Google, how high does your result come up? And those sort of principles can apply to searching on YouTube or you know, Instagram hashtags and stuff like that. It's all kind of the same theory. And the more I learned about how that stuff worked, the more I realized that those systems are designed to reward good content. And so the better your content is, the more people feel like they are getting what they came for and what they want, the more those systems are designed to help you. So I would really focus on the quality of the work. And then it's a lot easier then to be proud about or to almost feel an obligation to promote your content. To say like, look, I know that people should see this stuff. They are seeing it and they like it. So then you can start really showcasing the best of your work in a lot of different places like, Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and all that stuff. I'm maybe not the best person to ask on this. I believe everything that I said. I'm just not very good at doing it. So my day-to-day focus is more about, and has been, like with Giant Bomb and stuff, it has been more about the real, focusing on the actual production of the content itself. I'm not very good at marketing. So yeah, I guess take that with a grain of salt, everything that I said. But that's at least the theories that I've heard from places like VidCon and from a lot of reading that when you're a creator like this, it's your responsibility to kind of to know this stuff. And even if you don't use any of those marketing tactics, it's good to know. Like you need to know the rules before you can break them. The one phrase that I heard at VidCon that I thought was really good was that you want your stuff to be clickable, not clickbait. Clickbait doesn't actually, it may get you clicks, but it won't get you fans, lifelong subscribers, that kind of thing. So you should be clickable. It should be very enticing and give people what they came for, but it shouldn't be a bait and switch. Uncle Jam 23 writes in, Michael Jordan, I know it's you. Hey Drew, any plans on going to Africa? I know very little about the game industry, or games in general when it comes to any of the individual countries or communities in Africa, and I'd love to know more. Also, I generally just like the idea of ClothMap visiting every continent. So do I. I have never been to Africa, and I would love to explore it. This is like, it's this like, this hole in ClothMap's pantheon that I would really, really like to fill. There are video game developers there. I remember playing a game, I can't remember what it's called, but I played it on a Giant Bomb live stream a few years ago. So I know there is at least some kind of indie scene there. But I would also love to explore the non-video games there as well. I imagine there is a whole other branch of the tree of game evolution and sport evolution that has happened in Africa that I am just totally unaware of. So I would love to explore that and to find out what's going on there. Freddie Krill writes, hi Drew, with terabytes of footage, what's an efficient workflow so your computers don't crawl while editing in Premiere? Second question, how much are you editing or writing in your head while you're in the field? And I'll answer the first one first. This took me a little while to figure out, but Joey Fameli gave me a really nice tip, which was to use proxy files. So when you're filming on a camera, those files are really big because the resolution is high and the quality is high. Editing those files directly can sometimes slow down a computer. And you want really good performance because if you're scrubbing back and forth on a clip and a timeline, you want those frames to come up really fast instead of waiting a couple seconds every time you scrub through. So what you do is you compress those files or create a copy that's much smaller that you can work with, and that's called a proxy file. So the things that I'm actually editing are the proxy files. They're, I think, 720p and a much lower bitrate, so my computer can handle them. And then when you're done, you hit export, and those proxies link back to the original footage. And so what outputs from the editing program is the full resolution footage. So in practice, what happens is I put the full footage on my network attached storage drives. There are these boxes from a company called Synology that I just load up with a bunch of 4 terabyte hard drives, and then they show up on my computer like a giant external hard drive. I put all the big files there, and then I used to put the proxies on my local drive, so on my editing computer, the proxies would be there. But for this project, I am trying with the proxy files on the network attached storage itself. And I'm going through Ethernet instead of plugging them directly via like USB or something. So far that's working okay. I might decide that the performance is not as good and move the proxies to my computer. But it's a lot of footage, the Balkans is. So I might just have to suffer through it. Or get some kind of other solution going. But right now it's working okay. So that's how I do that. As to your second question, whether I'm or if I am editing or writing in my head while I'm in the field, I think so. There's a lot of planning that goes on before I get to a place, but you can't plan too much because you never know what you're going to get or not get, or what's going to happen there. So I kind of have a general sense when I go in of the story that I want to tell, but my priority when I'm there and when I'm filming is to really just capture what's happening, because I've set up a person and a place, and I'm going to see how that goes, right? And you want to leave an open mind, because if you're interviewing someone, you don't want to just run down your list of questions, because they might answer something that really needs to be explored. If they say something really interesting that I hadn't thought of, which is basically everything anyone ever says, that's why I'm talking to them, because I don't know what they're going to say. You need to be able to follow up with them and pull on those strings. So my priority is to capture what they say and respond rather than just go down a checklist. So in that sense, what I get from that can never be what I plan. So, and I guess generally I go in with like a theme that I want to explore. And that theme often is broad enough that it doesn't change. Sometimes it might morph a little bit, but the theme is what I use to stitch everything together, right? So going into Brazil, it was, the theme was, it's this alternate universe because politics kind of shaped the way that games evolved there. And of course, there were many subtleties to that I didn't understand before I got there, but that was kind of what I kept going back to. Cuba was pretty similar. It was, there's a lot of things that people don't have here, so how do they overcome that stuff? So yeah, I hope that answers your question. David Nibbs says, "Hi Drew, how do you begin the process of setting up meetings and finding the people to interview? How do you find those contacts? I wouldn't know where to start. Looking forward to your next vid, thumbs up emoji." That's a great question, which I've gone into it a little bit before, so I'll make this quick, but basically there are private tour guides out there for hire for tourists in almost every country. And they're advertised well on the internet and places like TripAdvisor or whatever, or even in Lonely Planet. I've found guides recommended in Lonely Planet that then I've contacted and actually used. But they're not always game people, right? So when I make first contact with these people, I explain Cloth Map. It's a video project. It's about games, and I also say it's about games and sports and board games, and I kind of lay it all out there because you never want to constrict yourself. They might know, you want to tell them the broadest thing because they might have some idea. Because basically I'm going to these people, the guides, local guides are the ones that are supposed to know everyone in the place that you're going. So the goal is to present them what Cloth Map is and hope that they have some contact. If it's not the person I contacted, hopefully they will go like, oh, I know a guy. You need to talk to this guy. And then they, forward my email or I email them. And then we set it up that way. So, by definition, almost, I'm going to countries that I have never been to and know zero people in. So I rely heavily on these local guides for this. Cody Armature says, what have been the biggest unexpected challenges for Cloth Map? If you'd known everything you know now, what would you have done differently in the early days? Good question. I would say the biggest question, or the biggest challenge, has been and continues to be a mental one. And maybe this is oh, no, it's not just me, but it's something that is probably pretty prevalent, honestly, with internet creators and probably most notably solo creators, which is this kind of pressure to get things out, especially when they're big, long projects. I feel a lot of pressure, and not from any of you directly. You guys are great. It's all very much self-inflicted, but when you have a project like this and you're taking people's money, at least I feel a large responsibility to get content out as fast as possible. But I also feel an obligation to make it worth the while of the people that are contributing. So I don't want to put out work that I'm not happy with, or that's not worth their money. So grappling with that has gotten better, but it's still, there are stresses in normal jobs. This is an abnormal job, and thus has different stresses. But yeah, it's something that I, and I think a lot of Patreon creators deal with. Yeah. As for what I would have done differently in the early days, I probably would have. I wish I could go back and tell myself, those things about looking for local guides and asking them, and also just the whole editing process, like using a transcription service to get a grapple on the interviews and things like that. Because the first trip, especially Ukraine, was a lot of me just like. It was just a lot of elbow grease, like trying to drum up things to see without really a lot of help in the local department. So I hadn't really figured out this thing. I did all the legwork of, I want to see this, but I don't know what else is out there. So no one was able to tell me what else I should go see, which is what's great about local guides, right? They tell you what you don't know. And the editing process for Chernobyl, which I talked about, was just like grappling with 2 solid days of footage walking around Chernobyl. Took me a long time to deal with, and now I have kind of a workflow down, so that kind of stuff. Albert writes in, hello Drew, when you are not traveling, what is your daily routine? Is there such thing as a weekend for you, or are you constantly working? Any chance of a Bay Area meetup? Would love to hear more of your travels in person. Thank you. And part 2, what is your long-term goal? 5 years from now, what do you envision Cloth Map to be? Format, types of videos and films being produced. Thanks. All right, a lot of questions there. First of all, I absolutely take weekends. I had heard before I started that solo projects like this can lead to burnout pretty quickly. So since you can always be at work, you can always be working and then never have a break, and then your work suffers, and then that's good for nobody. So I wanted to make sure that I staved that off, and so I made a conscious decision at the beginning. I'm only working on weekdays, and if any of my friends invite me to anything, I have to go. Because otherwise I would just become a hermit. So I highly recommend that course of action if you are thinking of becoming an independent creator, because your sanity translates to quality work. As far as daily routine goes, I've tried a lot of different structures, and it kind of changes depending on what stage of the project that I'm in. But generally, I have determined that I am best mentally, I have the most energy in the mornings. So I used to kind of like get everything that I wanted done in like non-work life before I started work, just to kind of like make sure that the rest of the day was free. But I realized that, and that included like working out or running. And I found that it would just make me tired. So I would get done with everything that I wanted to do and then start work and it would just be exhausted. So actually what I do now is I wake up, have coffee and a light breakfast, meditate, and then immediately roll into work at like 8 a.m. And then I use an app called Focus Keeper on my phone. And again, this is what I've used systems of timers and then I've gone off of them for a while. I'm currently on the wagon for Focus Keeper. And it uses the Pomodoro technique, which is, I think this one defaults to 25 minutes on and then 5-minute break, which it feels like it interrupts a lot, but it interrupts so that you can have a break. So it actually, I think in the long run, results in more focused work for a longer duration instead of me just focused for multiple hours straight. Because I also tried to do that as well. And while I could do that for a few hours, I would get to the end of that and again, just be exhausted. So this is more of a chip away kind of thing. So I do that, have lunch, continue, and then I end the workday. Since I started at 8 a.m., I end around 4 p.m., which then gives me an opportunity to do those other things like work out or go run an errand or something. Things are still open at like 4 p.m. So that's what's working for me right now. A Bay Area meetup would be fun, I think. Although I feel like I need kind of an occasion to do that. So maybe like 2 years of Cloth Map would be a good one. That could be fun. And as for long-term goal, I think it'd be cool. So I've kind of got two ideas here. I think it would be cool for Cloth Map to become more of like a media outlet and have multiple presenters because there's so many stories out in the world, right? So like being able to do different explore more places and to do different kinds of content, like a podcast or something like that. I think that could be really cool. I mean, different mediums work well for different kinds of stories. So I would love to be able to do stories like those. But then on the other side, though, and I haven't really formed this idea very much in my head, but basically, like I couldn't really anticipate this, but as I've gone on these trips, I've seen the struggles that a lot of people encounter in game development or with internet in Cuba or in Mongolia with like basic access to foreign goods, and I don't know. I wish I could help somehow, right? I wish Cloth Map could be something that would aid in smoothing some of that stuff out. So I don't really know what that would look like. I think the exposure that I'm giving the people and problems that they encounter is helping somewhat, at least like, raise awareness. But I wonder if there's a more direct way that I can do something. Yeah, if you have any ideas, let me know. Anonymous says, if you had to pick one airplane to fly from all airplanes ever created, from Santos Dumont's 14 BIS, I don't know what that airplane is. I'm gonna look it up. Oh wow, old 1906 plane, first flight outside the U.S. That is pretty cool. I mean, the Wright Flyer would be, I mean, there's so many cool, all right, I'm gonna finish the question. The 14 BIS, an A-10 Warthog, all the way to an F-22 Raptor. Assuming you could fly them all, which one would you choose and why? There is no purpose for your flight other than for you to enjoy it. And you really can only pick one. Thanks. Okay, so yeah, it's a tough question because there's so many cool planes. I actually have a poster on my wall that someone gave me while I was at Giant Bomb with, it's the filmography of aircraft, and it has it has the plane or the aircraft and then the movie that it's in and the year. It was super cool. And basically anything on that. I think though, if it's just like if it's just for me to enjoy it, I think I would really, really enjoy flying a U-2. Number one, you can practically go to space, which is super awesome. And also for the historical aspect of it too. You know, it played a monumental role in the Cold War. Gary Powers got shot down and captured by the Soviet Union. They flew over Cuba during the Cuban Missile Crisis. They're still flying today, doing, I think, like, patrolling waters for drug runners. I think the CIA still uses them too. Also, they just have an incredible development story. As a piece of engineering that, took place in like the 60s, they're crazy. If you really want to read a cool book, check out Skunk Works by Ben Rich. He's the guy that ran, or he's the second guy that ran the Skunk Works program at Lockheed Martin, and they developed like all those crazy planes, like the U-2, the SR-71, the F-117 stealth fighter. And he talks about like picking the spot for Area 51. He talks about all the crazy engineering that goes into these planes. For example, the U-2, when it's sitting on the runway, its wings, which are really, really long, if you've never seen the U-2, basically looks like a flying plus sign because the fuselage is really narrow and then the wings are really, really wide. But the wings are just loaded with fuel because this thing needs to fly for a long time to go over the Soviet Union. And the wings are so heavy that they bend and touch the ground. So they had to put little wheels on the ends of the wings so that on takeoff they wouldn't drag. And once the plane does take off, those little wheels fall away. They're just like, they're just held in place by the weight of the wings. It's like stuff like that. The SR-71 leaks fuel while it's sitting on the ground because the engines are ramjet engines. And I'm getting really nerdy here, but they leak until you turn them on because then the metal expands and closes the leaks. Cool stuff like that. Skunk Works by Ben Rich, but yes, my answer I think is the U-2. And finally, Kevin McCown says, "Hi Drew, I noticed on one of your shelves a replica bottle of McKinley's Old Rare Whiskey from Ernest Shackleton's Nimrod expedition. As someone who's a history buff, did learning about explorers like Shackleton or I can never say that word, Amundsen, play a role in your desire to travel and explore new cultures? Also, the bottle appears to be sealed and he plans to open it one day. Thanks and keep up the great work." First of all, good eye. My dad got me that as a present because we both like books about explorers and stuff. So I think if you're unfamiliar, Ernest Shackleton was an Antarctic explorer in the early 1900s, and he, on an expedition, I think this is the story, there's a good New York Times article about it actually, which I'll link on the Patreon page, but he buried a cache of goods that was only recently dug up, and they found a bottle of whiskey and from this brand called McKinley's, which, or McKinley's, I don't know, Scottish, that no longer existed. So they basically like reverse engineered it and recreated this whiskey and then sold recreations of it, and that's what that is. So as for like, did learning about explorers like that play a role in desire to travel? I don't really know. I think it probably all came from the same place. There's, the explorer thing. We also read a lot of books about like mountain climbers and jungle explorers. Lost City of Z is really good. Into Thin Air is really good. And I also like space, and planes and stuff. It's probably all from the same, whatever piece of my mind that is from. And travel, it all comes from the same place, I think. As for when I'm going to open it, I think I can only open that bottle if I go to Antarctica, which I would love to do one day. As long as I could find like an affordable and environmentally friendly way to do it. I've heard that a lot of those tours that go down there are not exactly great for that fragile ecosystem. So that's good call. I am really curious about what it tastes like. Also, maybe I should get better at drinking whiskey before I do to really appreciate it, because I like whiskey and scotch, but I don't really know what I'm doing. So, stay tuned for Cloth Map Antarctica. There you have it, another Q&A in the bag. Thanks everybody for writing in with questions. I should be posting another vlog here soon. With an announcement I'll say. So stay tuned for that, and I'll talk to you guys later.